Hello, dear friends. Whatever else we have, we always dream of one thing: to share our days and nights with someone who understands us, who loves us, gives us freedom, makes us feel better, and softens the blows of life. Why is this primordial human longing and need increasingly less satisfied, leading people to engage in so-called toxic relationships? Today, we will ask a real specialist on the topic, the psychotherapist Lilia Fotiva. You are welcome. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. She is also a writer with extensive professional expertise in supporting women who have experienced violence in Bulgaria and Spain. Additionally, she works with clients who have Parkinson's disease and conducts dance therapy classes. We are delighted to have you today in our studio. So, without further ado, let's get straight to the point. How did your path begin on this topic, with toxic relationships, with violence against women? When did you decide that this was your calling? First of all, I want to say thank you for the invitation. The beginning seemed like a coincidence, because while I was studying dance therapy in Barcelona, I first started doing the mandatory clinical practice with Parkinson's groups. After that, I worked with children, and it turned out that I needed additional hours for clinical practice to fulfill the standard university requirements. And since I have always wanted to work with women survivors, to be able to contribute in some way to their recovery, I said to myself, why not? This is the perfect time to send my CV and recommendations to all possible shelters in the area and to see what happens. Miraculously, at least 5 of them responded with interest in applying something as innovative as dance therapy. I started working with my first women's group in Amsterdam. There I led a 6-month group intervention for 6 women. And since then, I have continued working with more and more sheltered homes, and each time is different, unique, and profoundly transformative as well. An experience that is both very deep and challenging. Tell me now, define what a toxic relationship means, and how often it occurs. Lately, there has been a lot of discussion about the fact that it seems like every third woman or every third relationship in general is toxic. Yet, unfortunately, the statistics we have do not reflect the real situation. There are many more cases of such connections. Both harassment from a woman to a man and the opposite from a man to a woman. More often than not, women are victims. Yes. We observe much more. Basically, according to the World Health Organization, data from 2020, which I will quote by memory, approximately 765 million women around the world have been victims of domestic violence or violence by a former lover. Also, what I can say is that since I've been doing this job, whenever I share it with ladies, whether they're my girlfriends, co-workers, or acquaintances, I'm amazed that almost everyone says they have had similar experience too. Or, I had a boyfriend with whom we had even come to physical violence. This surprised me at first, and when it started to happen almost every time, 99% of the time, I said to myself, wow, this is the heart-reckoning tendency. There is almost no exception. It shows us how drastically incomplete the numbers are compared to what is happening out there. This status quo is also maintained by the lack of laws and the non-adoption of the Istanbul Convention in all countries, which, in turn, perpetuates the stigma imposed on women who have experienced such situations. Women often begin to worry that it is their fault. First, they had a partner who was a lover who terrorized them for an extended period, then all this guilt is embedded in the identity, it is accepted, and internalized by them. After this guilt is perceived as hers, and not of the abuser, it becomes harder for such a woman to report the violence. There is fear, there is horror, yes. What is the toxic bond? How does a psychotherapist define it? Because it has become very common in social media to talk about narcissism, but do we know what it is and how to figure out if we are entrapped in abusive dynamics? Absolutely, yes. There is a spike in the talks on narcissistic disorders. However, not everyone who talks about this, of course, has a deep knowledge. From a psychological perspective, our work with these ladies reveals that there is an absolute domino effect in their lives, originating from the domestic abuse. What do I mean? If she experiences oppression every moment, whether it is criticism that she does not earn enough money, or she doesn't have a job, or why she doesn't cook every day, or why isn't she beautiful enough, sexy enough for him, why has she put on some weight? Then, these micro-insults, repeated every day, lead to two situations. Or the woman closes herself off, isolates herself more and more from the outside world, becomes depressed, feels ashamed to share what she is going through, and thus sinks even further into the abuse, because no one can help her, her relatives do not see anything, do not understand the trap she is kept in. She cannot get out of this situation, because, in her isolation, and out of fear, she doesn't reach out for help. Another situation that can be observed is a significant shift in aggression. That is, while she is still with this partner, the very normal feeling of aggression she harbors against him, which she cannot express to him, it's projected towards other people. Whether it will be to colleagues at work, friends, parents, family, or her children. And this again leads her to isolation. So, no matter how we look at it, this is a rock-bottom connection in which the abused person descends deeper and deeper in the spiral of despair and becomes more and more isolated, gradually loses all their external resources, and internal as well, because their self-esteem evaporates dramatically after these constant attacks from their partner. We invited you because you wrote an excellent article for our magazine, which was in the June issue of Magazine 8. Whoever has not seen it yet, can look for it. In this material, you laid out in great detail the stages, the scars of toxic relationships, and then I was very caught by these signs of an abusive relationship, and how to recognize it. Can you now describe them again for the viewers? Of course. The first thing by which we can tell that we are in a toxic relationship is a sharp change in self-esteem. And this starts slightly, almost imperceptibly. While we used to be super confident people, we knew what we could do in our work, we knew how we looked, and we knew what we brought to the table in our friendships with our loved ones. However, at some point, these constant attacks that we have received sow a stiff grain of doubt in the minds, and we began to talk to ourselves, to question our worth with the same poisonous voice of the abuser in our mind, deeply embedded, as though it is our own. The toxic relationship functions as a push-pull, back-and-forth movement of intermittent reinforcement, but gradually the abuse that the victims experience escalates, becomes harsher. The controlling individual increases the intensity of the oppression. It always starts with tiny insults. The person will test how we will react. If we fail to set boundaries at the early signs, it leads to even greater escalations of tension, and then there is always an apology from the abuser at some point, to keep us hooked. However, there is no need to hope for a permanent change, because soon after the perpetrator crosses the boundaries of their partner again, the cycle repeats. So, to go back to your question, the first sign of a toxic relationship is the drastic drop in self-esteem. The second point is one we have already touched on, specifically the displaced aggression of the victim, which manifests as short-temperedness towards the world at large. It is very difficult when you are abused. Such reaction is understandable as an aftermath of the violence. I do not say it at all as criticism. We are used to working with such groups. We are used to the fact that our boundaries as psychotherapists will be tested and there will be aggressive behaviors, and this is normal. So, it is crucial to maintain a safe environment where it is allowed to work with the aggression trapped in the bodies of the survivors. We then work with the aggression, so that this emotion does not remain with a person, so that it can be transformed. Hence, the second sign by which we can judge that we are in a toxic relationship is getting incredibly nervous. I also want to say to all your families, if you notice such behaviors, you don't have to worry right away that something bad is going on under the surface, but it's not bad to ask gently about it. How are you? What's going on with this relationship? The Enlighteners Foundation in Bulgaria has an excellent campaign on the front line, which educates the relatives of women victims of domestic violence on how to adequately support the family member who has been or is still in a toxic relationship. The third sign of abusive dynamics is constant comparison with other people, a feeling of inadequacy, mood swings, and toxic partners use the method of triangulation to stir the spin of continual comparison in the minds of their victims. For example, they may mention the sexy colleague who helped them finish a project, or an ex-partner inviting them to lunch. And the setup is ready for self-tormenting, jealousy breeding, and competition with others. Yes. Till in one moment. Chaos reigns in this woman's head, especially if this tactic is used after she has been subjected to numerous attacks on her appearance, qualities, and work abilities, and this does not come immediately. Triangulation occurs in a subsequent stage of the relationship, which can be very devastating. Yes. Because this is another blow to self-confidence. And a literal rejection. For people who have the trauma of rejection from their childhood, and there are many of them, I, for example, also had to work with such a trauma, triangulation reopens this wound. And instead of the person leaving the dynamic, they become even more glued to it. Instead of this woman saying up to here, no more, she goes deeper in the relationship, probably out of unconscious hope that this time the riddle with feeling rejected will be solved differently. She goes closer to him. She can even get coerced more, to indulge him, to please. And accordingly, it is competition, so she strives to prove that she is better than all the others. When the contrary is true, she doesn't need to prove anything like that. She has fallen victim to the brainwashing of a fictitious competition. But at this moment, she has no way of understanding it, because it is an attack on her ways of thinking. When feelings are used, rationality is turned off in toxic relationships. Okay, while we are on the topic, could you share some advice and techniques from your work on how to work with an abandonment wound? I will give myself as an example. What has helped me is my personal therapy. I have been going, maybe for 6 years, 7 even, to Jungian psychoanalysis. Accordingly, for every person, there may be a different method. I do not at all imply that now everyone has to go to Jungian psychoanalysis, in any case. But it was something that clicked for me. Yes, me too. You too? Yes. Awesome. Jungian work opened my heart, and it was something I was incredibly eager for. If you are more imaginative, artistic, and symbol-driven, you will likely enjoy working with symbols and archetypes. Jungian therapy, art therapy, and yoga can also be particularly beneficial for you. I highly recommend yoga, as well as Zumba. Zumba is so energetic. Open our field, or as we call it in dance movement therapy, our kinesphere. Kinesphere is our personal space. When we make large, significant, expansive movements, it grows our space. On the contrary, when we have been in toxic relationships, our kinesphere shrinks to the maximum. We also shrink our capacity and power. This is why, when we engage in vigorous activities like Zumba, climbing, or jumping, we counteract the abuse's negative impact. The women with whom I have worked adored kickboxing. We used boxing gloves in part of the classes, so that we could practice this renewal of personal space. The opening. Greek dances also have a good impact. I have researched Greek dances integrated into dance therapy. Again, because of all the typical kicks, jumps, and opening hands to the side in the so-called eagle posture of the iconic Sirtaki dance in Zorba the Greek. Have you studied the effect of Bulgarian or other Eastern dances? No, but I plan to. It would be interesting to show that they possess the same power as the Greek dance. Okay, and at the level of consciousness, is there anything we can do, something to strive for, so that we can work off this wound of abandonment? Because, as far as I understand, it is not the main center of attraction for toxic relationships. Yes. It's easiest when we find our community where we can feel safe. That is, if I do not feel safe at home, in my relationship, I must find another haven in every possible way. I strongly recommend it to every person who faces domestic abuse, whether a man or a woman. No matter if this is a group for mountaineering, tourism, or whatever. And there is no need to talk there, because the most challenging thing is to first share that you are in a toxic relationship. But when the time comes and you are ready for it, verbalizing the story is going to be one of your most essential tools for restoring your power. However, for the beginning stages of getting out of the trap of the toxic relationship, going out of the isolation, just the warm human contact is going to help you gradually come back to yourself. This is the first, foundational phase. Finding a community and feeling cozy there. Secondly, engaging in individual or group therapy also fosters a fundamental human connection that aids in rebuilding trust and initiating the healing process. Additionally, it would help us unpack the childhood traumas that often lead us into such relationships. Working therapeutically lowers the shame, enables us to process what is going on, and to share it with other trusted people. That's already a massive achievement. Once you see the abuse, you can't unsee it. Sharing also puts it on the table. The process is initiated. And more importantly, the survivor knows that they have liberated a lot of energy, previously trapped in suppressing the obvious and denying the abuse out of fear. However, it is worth noting that suppressing and denying are standard mechanisms in the beginning, especially before the isolation of the victim is broken down. The moment of going out of the bubble created by the abuse marks a significant victory of the survivor reclaiming their agency, as previously they have been made by their abuser believe they are incapable. I firmly believe that every one of us has at least one close person to whom they can share. That's where things start to unravel. Yes, the process is long, but there is a way out. There is hope. When a woman, for example, finds out that she is in such a relationship, is it difficult to break it? Absolutely. Incredibly hard. It is partly because loved ones who use such techniques and are aggressive somehow know, even subconsciously, that they are working. Intuitively, they sense their partner's wound and understand that, with this very thing, triggering her to compete or feel desperate, making her believe she will struggle to find a good job to stand on her own 2 feet, or that no one else will want her, consequently, she will stay with him longer. Yes. Or even if she left, they know how to get her back. Again, with just a push of one of her buttons, which he knows well. Is it common for women to reconsider their decision after initially leaving? There is a study that proves that women return up to 7 times to rekindle relationships with abusive partners. On average. This speaks volumes about how difficult it is to get out of a toxic relationship. I repeat, difficult, but not impossible. Evan Stark, who was the first to coin the term coercive control, claims that all underlying abuse, if there is any in a coercive control case, is functioning thanks to the main ingredient, emotional abuse. Physical abuse is not always present in coercive control, but emotional abuse is a mandatory element. Stark reveals another detrimental component, the so-called remote control. That is, the woman may have left, but if there is still any contact with the perpetrator, be it by email, by phone, or if they have children together, he will know precisely how to influence her mood or even, in some cases, ruin her life and reputation, and will do it. Carefully programmed technique, in which he can throw his former lover off balance with one sentence or just one word. Okay, is this purposeful knowledge, or is it somehow instinctive because of his wounds? What makes one person behave this way and terrorize and harass the other? He is certainly not the big bad wolf. Surely it has a backstory. What is the root of this behavior for a person to become so poisonous to others? That's for sure, he, or in some cases, she, is not all evil. We don't want to label men, point the finger at them. This helps nobody. It is crucial to work with young boys, teenagers, and men, as well as to organize mixed groups of men and women, and to show admiration for all colleagues who work with men. As to the root cause, the reasons can vary widely. In some cases, the person may indeed have, as I mentioned earlier, certain psychological conditions. Here we may not always talk about a full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, but of some narcissistic traits in his character. In the most severe cases, we can even talk about psychopathy, sociopaths, or psychopaths. It also often happens that these types of men have their trauma, which is replicated and reproduced in toxic relationships. Childhood trauma. In their case, it can also be from the mother or the father. That is, the father may have left the family early for whatever reason. This abusive man in his childhood may have grown up only with his mother and didn't get the chance to internalize any positive male model of behavior. When the issue is rooted more in his relationship with his mother, it might be due to a more obsessive-possessive mother, who didn't allow her son enough independence and to develop himself. The warm relationships with the mother during the boy's formative years, up to 3 years old, are fundamental for his character development. Afterwards, follow other periods, where the boy takes more distance from his mom to step into his manhood. What we often see is a literal, total mixing and confusion of roles. For example, if a particular man has an obsessive mother, he has not overcome this trauma, this wound, he has not grieved that he was never mothered the way he should have, even though she will never change. He needs to change internally, to transform his first image of a woman. The first image of a woman, An internal image of a woman in a man is the one he received from the mother. When he has not reworked this image, if it was negative, and has not forgiven the trauma he lived with the mom. And let's be honest, in our work as psychotherapists, we hear and work with shocking stories of mother-to-children abuse sometimes. However, not processing this trauma means inevitably bringing it to future generations. Another study shows that men who grew up with 1 or 2 abusive parents are 3 times more likely to become abusers themselves. In contrast, women who grow up in similar settings typically enter into adult relationships where they take on submissive roles or get abused again. And so, the trauma gets rehashed and passed on. One way for men to stop passing on generational trauma is to work with the inner woman image that he has received from his mom, to rebuild it to a healthy image. In other words, to work with his emotions, he must acknowledge his vulnerability. So that his inner woman is not aggressive anymore, as his mother was or maybe still is. Or as Carl Jung says, the anima. Yes, his anima. Otherwise, any woman who stands next to such a man will hear insults, be tortured, or be devalued. None will be good enough to defeat and conquer his devouring, angry anima. Only he can do that, if he wishes to take responsibility. And again, this is why it is crucial to work with men. They also need help. And you said it very well. We don't point the finger to the big, bad wolf who needs to be punished. Instead, we need to work together, both socially and otherwise. If the topic of mother-son relationships is interesting for you, we have a whole issue of Spizony 8 dedicated to it. This is the February issue of this year. You can look for it. It is very extensive. So, check out our website. And let's continue on the topic. What internal foundations do we need to build to be able to act, as they say, preventively? To spare ourselves the trouble of falling into a toxic trap? Great question. A very complex one, too. What do I mean? We are very connected to society. Unfortunately, not everyone recognizes it, but we have quite serious remnants of the patriarchate, not only in Bulgaria. This is all over the world. Additionally, there are ongoing wars. Total slaughter of this patriarchy in its blackest version. This brute male power that imposes through control, through power, but not through feeling. Or not through the feminine principle. Opening through the heart. So, in a very complex way, I think that we should approach and work as a whole, as a society. The programs, like the one on the front line support of the Wake Up Foundation Enlighteners, are very, very important. Conversations like ours, as well as the article we published in Magazine 8, raise awareness and direct society's attention to pressing topics. No matter how much depth and personal development we achieve, there are severe public problems that we cannot solve individually. It depends on the government and a change in public attitudes. Otherwise, on a personal level, I have also had a friend who has escaped from an abusive relationship, thank God. I can provide an example of a moral value and its impact on her case. As a result of the abuse, she had lost contact with her parents, under the coercive control influence of her ex-partner. And accordingly, the control, the snatching on his part, became much stronger afterwards. When she terminated her relationship with him, she shared, "I learned one thing. Never isolate yourself from your parents. Not to stay glued to them and not advancing your life further. But not to cut the relationship, because parents are the ones who always give. The power flows in the correct order from parents to children. If there is anyone who can help on the front line in such a situation, it is the parents. They may not understand at first. Or may be angry. Or possibly criticizing, which I would strongly advise not to. Because we also become aggressors if someone comes to disclose abuse, and we criticize. But one way or another, they will try to help. Even if you only have one person in your life who is close to you, then you are rich, that is already a good start. To find your way to support. Network. The external resources we can rely on are a leading factor. Yes. We talked about the signs of a toxic relationship. In our preliminary conversation, you shared about a pattern that is often repeated in such the alternation of crumbs of attention and then scandal, insults. Tell us a little more so that people can recognize it more easily. This is again a mechanism that hijacks rational thinking. And it works with addiction. In other words, if I have high adrenaline, even from a negative situation, scandal or quarrel, my brain pumps up adrenaline to the maximum. As though I have just made 5 bungee jumps, drove a race car, or won the lottery. Yes, yes, yes. And because of the adrenaline ups and downs, even though we are talking about negative emotions, our brain is waiting for the next adrenaline rise moment. And this is not voluntary. It happens automatically. It's how the brain biochemistry is wired. And that's why abusers can very successfully hold someone hooked for years on crumbs of attention. I give a slight attention, withdraw, pump up the adrenaline, then withdraw again, reconcile. This leads to total fog in the brain of the survivor, who loses orientation, gets dissociated from their real feelings, their bodily sensations, and the actual situation at hand. The question, do I want to stay or go? Becomes impossible to answer. One day, I am on the 7th sky. I'm certain. Here it is, proof that he is good again, loving and sweet. Everything is going to be okay. But then, on the following day, when another scandal hits, she is down again. Yes. There is one constant loss of libido. Vital and creative energy, which in the case of a woman who is a victim, becomes trapped in trying to understand what is happening. Or in trying to heal him, or save him. Yes, he will change, she encourages herself. Or, he was so wonderful, why can't we go back to how it was in the beginning? Or we are just hoping for a miracle. With a magic wand. Often, we, women, are conditioned to believe that the very fact that we love this person can help. And here I think that there are very guilty fairy tales like, yes, and Cinderella and the Snow Queen. Okay, is it possible that we were really in a good, healthy relationship with a normal, healthy person, and subsequently, he becomes abusive? That is, he was not toxic in the beginning and did not have distortions in his soul? Let's say. Or is it always a pathology? Let's say that it may be possible, but something very traumatic has to happen for this person to make a sharp turn and abruptly change their behavior. And in this case, we are talking about a subsequent life trauma already in adult life, which should not affect so severely. Suppose everything has flowed well and harmoniously from the start, theoretically speaking. In that case, it shouldn't disrupt the relationship between the two partners, assuming they can always sit down, sort out the problem, and move on. In most cases, the problematic behavior is initially hidden under the surface, and it very often starts later. Because the abusive partner is first busy to impress you and sweep you off your feet, with trips to distant countries, diamonds, and gifts. So, we live and breathe the story of a modern Cinderella, sometimes. Feeling like that is not our fault. It is a trap we fall into that was previously set by society, shaping us to overvalue romanticized love. To potential childhood trauma, we can add socialization, social pressure, and patriarchy, which promises the prince on a white horse to girls who can become princesses if they are sweet and innocent. And it is very easy to fall into such a trap, then. And somehow instinctively, these men know it. And after he has conquered her, the next stage follows when the bullying begins. Very subtle at first. You said about the dazzling beginning. And this is quite natural, considering the kind of romantic era in which we live, in which we talk endlessly about love, about butterflies in the stomach, about deep passion. What does a healthy beginning of a fulfilling relationship look like? Advance slowly. A fundamental principle is to have two self-sufficient individuals who can enjoy themselves, do not seek approval at all costs, do not rush too much, do not want to prove themselves, or do not want proof from the other person. And it starts with self-confidence. Every single thing that boosts our self-confidence makes us more stable, which is particularly beneficial when starting a new relationship. Confidence helps to put the brakes on unwanted behaviors and brings independence of thought, because I know my inner self, and if something is not okay for me, I can always say no, right? But very often, this type of man does not respect boundaries. They find a way at the beginning, again through the dizzying, through the pleasant surprises, to break all the boundaries of this woman. She may have already communicated, either directly or indirectly, that this speed is uncomfortable for her and she wants to slow down. However, he manages to convince her to start living together after the second month. What qualities should we look for before the passion and attraction? Chemistry can sometimes deceive us. How important is it, though? Now we have already begun to form marriages based on love, and we see how this very often leads to failure. In the past, people were getting married after the approval of their family line, offspring, and social status by their future husband. The families looked at each other. And marriage was much more than the union of two individuals, it was the union of two family systems. Whether the clans fit together, what is the behavior of the person towards the family? Much more reasonable arguments have led individuals to enter into relationships or marriages. Now we are already looking for the great love, and we seem to bang our heads against the wall after every failure. What is the most important thing, and what is the role of passion? It is nice to have a passion, but you're right, we often act like slaves to it and get misled. Very, very often, when there is too much passion, we can already think about red flags. It is essential to check at the beginning if this person listens to us and respects our boundaries. If we see any, even minimal, response or outburst of negative emotions, it is a red flag. Fiery red. Very abrupt changes in the communication style also signal issues, even though the two of us may have the best chemistry in the whole world. First, we may write non-stop, in the middle of the night, romantic messages, with an incredible outpouring of love. And then unexpectedly, we find ourselves facing his or her abrupt disappearance. For 2 or 3 days, maybe 4, and so it goes, we have just activated the trauma of rejection again. Accordingly, if we tend to doubt ourselves or seek more approval from the outside than from the inside, what happens? We become immediately more attracted and attached to them. This is the so-called anxious attachment style. We don't want to miss out, we don't want to feel that old trauma of rejection again, so we start gripping for the crumbs, for the hope that this time we can rewrite the story. Hence, we need to be aware of our predisposition to attachment in relationships and, above all, to pay attention to people who tend to misuse it and push our buttons for their own gain. Understanding that we have nothing to lose is crucial, and developing a mature personality, rather than acting out from that old wounded little child. This is where therapy can help train new patterns, enabling us to respond with great class if we are subjected to this type of behavior. Then we can observe, register abuse, draw the necessary conclusions, and stop chasing love and the prize. Instead, we can focus on our self-worth first and foremost, making us less manipulable. This would immediately give out a signal that we are not easily influenced or pulled away from our center. We don't chase promises or dangling carrots in dating. And what quality is most important to look for? Very serious questions. Well, these are the important questions that no one has an answer to. We need to look for respect, equality, and space to develop ourselves. If I feel understood in this relationship, not pseudo-supported, but if I have the agency and horizon to be myself. Does he or she respect my different opinion when we disagree? Can he make compromises and meet halfway? Would he walk the extra mile, or is it only I investing all the efforts? Does he use outbursts of nervousness and temper tantrums to influence my opinion? Is he criticizing me for thinking differently? Then he's trying to remodel me. We are all free. No matter if we are in a relationship or not, married or not. Freedom is a fundamental quality, and if a person wants to influence my thinking and my assessments of the world, my worldview, and inner peace in this way, this is not okay. In my personal opinion, the most important quality is his ability to see the real me, all of me. Can I be fully present next to him? Can I be myself? Very often, the toxic partners who love control love to make their significant others obey. Value precisely the lack of demonstrated strong individuality by their partners. It is hard for them to tolerate differences, as this threatens their fragile ego. But they have an illusory, childish image of what a partner should be. They haven't outgrown the so-called infantile love. Everything good, beautiful, and subtle in a woman is perfectly welcome to him. However, any human quality, let's say if I'm angry or I'm going to express my aggression in a healthy way, I'm not allowed to. And this again is connected to how much his anima, or his inner woman, his sensitivity and openness has developed. Often, toxic and controlling partners have a very shallow ability to express emotions and to tolerate a rich spectrum of sensations. On the contrary, a man who has put an effort to develop his inner woman, his anima, will be able to break the cycle of rigid control, will feel through his heart, and get closer to his woman. He knows that he is not perfect, no one is, so he cannot demand from his partner to be perfect either. Hence, he will not need to project his negative view of the feminine for her to carry or represent. Otherwise, he is doomed to continue this or any further relationship with constant measuring, a continuous weighing of the scales, diminishing her contributions, and boosting his, because he sees her not as a person, not as an individuality, but as a possession. I'm tempted to ask you a question, related again to Jung, as he is also very intriguing to me. However, can a man with anima issues be attracted to a woman who doesn't have issues with her animus, or her inner man? That's a great question, yes. It can. Here I want to say firmly that it can, because in my experience working with women, as well as from conversations with colleagues, I see that domestic violence can happen to absolutely anyone. No matter our social status, race, culture, or how much we have in our bank account. So yes, it is possible, literally, for a person who does not have such traumas and has a sufficiently well-developed animus to attract a toxic and abusive partner. And accordingly, such a person would probably get away much faster. Hypothetically, however, many factors can impact or delay the exit of such a relationship. Sometimes getting out is slower. But, in most cases, too, if I have attracted a partner who has an underdeveloped inner woman or anima, and he projects his wounded view of the feminine on me. If he constantly blames me, I should examine myself more deeply, and if I do therapy, it will undoubtedly turn out that my inner man also needs to develop. And again, we come to the social issues we started our conversation with, to the need to deal with the patriarchal legacy, and raising awareness on what messages are still sometimes sent to women. How are our global societies moving further from patriarchy? Can they truly favor strong, professionally developed women, or is it still expected of them to be in caretaker or nurturing roles in the work arena as well? While other expressions of emotions are forbidden territory for the ladies. Sometimes in the West workplaces, strong women are still compared to bitches, or called too masculine. When, in fact, there is a social or interpersonal inhibition of the development of the inner man or woman, this serves no one. If the woman suffers in society or her personal life, everyone suffers too. Children suffer, men suffer, parents suffer, colleagues suffer, everyone suffers. And it is in the common interest of all of us to move towards a more equal partnership world, in which a woman can take her equal place next to the man, not behind him, equally with a man, to move also towards equal salaries. That's a great question, yes. It can. Here I want to say firmly that it can, because in my experience working with women, as well as from conversations with colleagues, I see that domestic violence can happen to absolutely anyone. No matter our social status, race, culture, or how much we have in our bank account. So yes, it is possible, literally, for a person who does not have such traumas and has a sufficiently well-developed animus to attract a toxic and abusive partner. And accordingly, such a person would probably get away much faster. Hypothetically, however, many factors can impact or delay the exit of such a relationship. Sometimes getting out is slower. But, in most cases, too, if I have attracted a partner who has an underdeveloped inner woman or anima, and he projects his wounded view of the feminine on me. If he constantly blames me, I should examine myself more deeply, and if I do therapy, it will undoubtedly turn out that my inner man also needs to develop. And again, we come to the social issues we started our conversation with, to the need to deal with the patriarchal legacy, and raising awareness on what messages are still sometimes sent to women. How are our global societies moving further from patriarchy? Can they truly favor strong, professionally developed women, or is it still expected of them to be in caretaker or nurturing roles in the work arena as well? while other expressions of emotions are forbidden territory for the ladies. Sometimes in the West workplaces, strong women are still compared to bitches, or called too masculine. When, in fact, there is a social or interpersonal inhibition of the development of the inner man or woman, this serves no one. If the woman suffers in society or her personal life, everyone suffers too. Children suffer, men suffer, parents suffer, colleagues suffer, everyone suffers. And it is in the common interest of all of us to move towards a more equal partnership world, in which a woman can take her equal place next to the man, not behind him, equally with a man, to move also towards equal salaries. Yes. Hence, we, women, should not be afraid to develop this strong side in us. The more a woman has a developed inner man, this active energy, the better for her and the others. Yes, she will no longer likely to fall into the poisonous trap of toxic relationships. She will likely be in a normal relationship, founded on trust and respect. And this is the big difference. What would you say to women who remain in toxic relationships because of financial dependence on a man? Again, a very fundamental question and a very complex one. It is worth mentioning that often, an additional element of coercive control is financial abuse. Typically, a man with financial means to support his woman and children, if they have any, will make a sweet-sounding announcement that she doesn't need to work. But here is the catch: in that way he, knowingly or unknowingly, cuts the wings of her animus. Her potential careers she would love to do in the world and would become very successful at. And this can lead into financial abuse of her potential, if she is with a toxic partner, who would not take interest of her, or would use his money and her lack of opportunities to control her. Hence, my advice to those women would be to remember what they wanted to do in this world as a profession and chart a plan to realize it. If she wanted to become a designer, to enroll in such training. Because of the control and coercion, toxic partners may try to make her change their mind, so they continue keeping the status quo. Hence, often, I hear in my profession, these women have to hide from their partners any decisions related to personal and professional development. So, if you have to hide it to protect your initiative, hide it. This is to your advantage, so that you can complete what you want. That is, it is again the power to think strategically about yourself, to put yourself first, to make a specific plan, and to navigate out of the toxic relationship labyrinth. And then, if you have a profession, you can get back on your feet. With creative energy flowing, you may find that, after all this personal development, you'll look at this relationship in a different light. Maybe you won't need it or want it anymore. As you are fully connected to who you are and your dreams. It is very important, if we have forgotten due to the abuse, to remember what we dreamed of before the toxic relationship. Reconnection to these aspirations is our engine for going out of the abuse. Dreams are one of the first things that are suppressed in a toxic relationship. Your vision may drastically change from adrenaline intermittent stimulation, cortisol goes sky high. We can gain weight. We forget to dream. We often forget to do the things we love, including our hobbies. Apart from the isolation from the rest of the world, which we have already mentioned. So, find a community that serves as your truthful mirror of your values, helping you remember who you are, dream again, and gather the courage to pursue this path. It's wonderful to end this extremely useful conversation on such an uplifting note. Thank you so much for being our guest. And I think we have room for at least one more such conversation in the near future. You are always welcome to our studio with new topics, or with the continuation of this one. Thank you so much. Dear friends, in the days we live in which violence is not only at home, but worldwide, in which violence comes in the form of wars and people dying, I would like to remind you of an excellent quote of my favorite mystic and poet, Rumi, and with it to finish our conversation today. With life as short as a half-taken breath, don't plant anything but love. Have a lovely evening and see you soon.